Good Thursday evening, everybody. Welcome to eMLB SportsNet as we get ready to provide you a wrap-up edition of the 2026 season. Got an eclectic mix of hosts amongst us. They are ready to go. We have a few things to talk about, and our first days of this eMLB off-season getting ready to take place. What do you think, gang?
Let's go while we're young.
Well, let's go while we're young, so let's just do it. Let's go.
Welcome. Come in. Fresh victims for my ever-growing army of the undead.
Sir, you have to let go of the button.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Normally, you're used to seeing us on here, but we're gonna do things a little differently. There you go. Figure out the buttons, Kamish, professional streamer, yo. Welcome. It is the 2026 wrap-up show here, eMLB Sportsnet style. I am Kamish LB, and I welcome you to another episode of the Fluffy Kitty Ninja Show, the home of the eMLB universe. Here with us, professional streamers presented by Twitch indeed. Which reminds me, why am I struggling seeing my usual stuff? Because my program ain't on. What's up with that? There we go. That works better for me. So, here we go, gang. Let's introduce everybody. Sorry about that. Let's introduce everybody. To my right, you've seen this guy before. He is our Pittsburgh Pirates GM, Cody Koshin. Cody, welcome back. How you doing, sir? I don't know if he can hear me.
I'm good. How are you?
There he is. We're good. We're good. Great to have you. Thanks for coming in. You said you had a new setup, so maybe you'll share a little bit of that when we have an opportunity. Real quick, though, let me jump over to others. Here's a new face to the group. Welcome, Jason Cleghorn, who we like to constantly play Foghorn Leghorn clips when we bring him up. Jason is one of our newest GMs. He is taking over the Minnesota Twins, fellow New Englander, so always good stories to talk about there. Down to my well, what is that? That is my bottom right, Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners. He had a playoff run this year. He's got that Mariner Mafia. I'm sure he's got some thoughts on that tonight, but we'll look forward to hearing his overall thoughts. And, well, we don't have to introduce that guy. We know him quite well, Aiden Pearson. He is a real-life play-by-play guy. He's done one game with us here on the show. We'll hope to do more than that. Of course, Aiden now with his hometown Tampa Rays as the GM. Guys, great to all have you here. How you feeling tonight?
Good.
Good, good. You, Ryan?
Good, Commish. Thanks for having us.
Hey, glad to have you all here.
Forward to it.
Glad to have you all here. I know Aiden's ready. I've seen him, gripping a baseball and working a little bit of pitching here while getting ready to go. So he's warmed up. He's in the bullpen and he's ready. So let's jump right to it. Let's talk 2026 World Series. That was a pretty good one. A lot of offense. And we saw some pitching here. Probably what I remember most about these 5 games is the hitting itself, but definitely would love to get your thoughts on the series and would also love for you to share what you think the future is of each of these organizations. Could we see a rematch next season? Or do you think different? So I'm going to start with Cody here, because I'm sure Cody has some choice words about his fellow divisional rival in the Chicago Cubs. But what was your thoughts on the series and the future for these two franchises?
I kind of expected that outcome, but that's no shot at Jake. Honestly, when Jake got in here and he accidentally waived Frambo Valdez, I thought that I was lucky to have him in my division. It was going to be easy to beat him, but that hasn't been the case. So I've grown to respect Jake a lot lately, and his payroll is pretty good, sitting at like 150-ish going to next season. He has that big budget, so I think the future is bright for him. He doesn't really have much prospects coming up, but he does have that pitcher, Luis Aldana. I think pitching was his weakest his weak link this season, and I think that could kind of boost his rotation a little bit. And a big question going into the offseason is he gonna extend Carson Kelly?
Yeah. Actually, we've heard some rumblings that there has been talk on Kelly, who is loved. He's a hometown guy from Chicago. They love it, and I understand that talks are attempting to progress this season. Maybe we see some closure here during our broadcast. As for those of you watching, we are going to be simming our first 4 days of this season in the background, so we'll take a peek and see if there's any noteworthy events. So good point, Cody. We may actually see that the guy that they lean on very heavily as a captain, as a leader, they do seem to have that interest in wanting to have him stay there around that very potent offense.
And with Houston, their high payroll kind of scares me with the future, and they probably want to resign Rowan and Elvis when that time comes. So that might be a little difficult to do with their payroll right now.
It could, as we take a peek at Grayson Rowan here. Rowan is still a little more than a year away from being eligible for any type of extension talk. And you've got to think a guy who hits north of 300, had 36 home runs, 89 RBI, and provides the defense that he does. It's going to be expensive to probably be able to keep him. So very good points. Houston might have a hard time trying to keep this glue together here, but I assume that they're going to be a problem next season, no matter what the division realignments do for them. Probably wouldn't be surprised if they win as many games as they do this season. So, I'd love to hear Jason Cleghorn's opinion. Jason's new to this. Jason's going to jump right into the fire. Jason, what were your thoughts on this series and both of these teams' future?
So I was looking at the Cubs lineup, and the big three, arguably the big four, are arguably better than the Astros' best four batters, but they didn't come through as much. And I think that really one of the difference is that I think Houston was a little bit deeper. I think their bottom players are a little bit better than the Cubs were. I'm looking at, like your Tank Esplin, Daniel Cabrera, while a 300 hitter, kind of a little bit empty. Brendan Rodgers at 230s. I think the Astros lineup 1 through 9 was overall stronger. And I have to say, Ben he's just a great GM from what I can see so far. I was very impressed. I've watched some of the YouTubes. He definitely has a plan. Not that Jake doesn't. I'm not saying that, but very impressive. I kind of felt like going into that the Cubs pitching just wasn't quite there with the rotation. Not quite. I mean, he did get to the World Series, so it's not like he's chopped liver. But I did expect the Astros to win, although I thought the Cubs acquitted themselves well. But moving forward, I mean, Astros are just right now a juggernaut, and right now we're all like chasing them.
Yeah, great points. Just let's put some clarity on it as we look at the playoff breakdown of both of these teams. And good mention, you've got the Dannies. Well, Danny Smith Jr. had 4 hits, 3 were homers, but he hit .211 in the series. Danny White hit .421. Tank Esplin, who's not really known for his offense, hit .350. But again, they didn't produce. Daniel Cabrera, outside of his grand slam, is kind of marginal. And then I think the bigger point is looking at the pitching. The best pitcher you had of the starters was Steven Randolph, and he was 0-2 with a 9.64 ERA. Bill Sullivan had a 20 ERA. Ricky DeVito won the only game, and he had 11.5 ERA. Alberto Sojo, 23 ERA. The bottom line is that when the pitchers were needed, they didn't follow through. Penn did okay. We saw a nice performance from Braylon Marquez. Nate Wolgemuth. But you're right. It's when push came to shove, the pitchers brought it far more. David Elvis was very dominant for most of this. Corbin Martin did his job, and even the bullpen. I don't think there was any one real player outside of Zach Birdie. And Birdie, I think, was more just a victim of situation. So yeah, he just put it together at the right time, most likely in that particular instance. We won't try to beat a dead horse, but we'd love to hear how Ryan Hetzer looked at this series and what he thinks is the future of these organizations. I can imagine he's got a few thoughts on Houston in particular.
Yeah, sure. Entertaining series, a lot of offense, which I think was to be expected. But I think the reason that the Astros came out on top is the same reason why I would stay with them as having the brighter future in the next, 2 to 3 seasons in the eMLB universe. The pitching, they had more pitching than the Cubs. So even though both teams had, the killer lineups, I think that's why they were able to prevail. And so when you look into the future, Houston has 2 young guys that already impacted the roster this year, and Freshwater and Bonilla. They got 2 other top 100 prospects, pitchers, in Southwick and Mangia coming up. And so the future is bright on the pitching side for them as well. Whereas when we look at the Cubs organization, you just don't see that that pitching on the horizon. Now, the wild card still, though, is what pitching is available in free agency this year. I think none of us quite know. So the Cubs having that payroll, they could potentially fill some of those pitching gaps with some free agency or dealing from strength within their organization. So they have the opportunity to get there. But as we sit here today, if we had to put all our balls of yarn on one team to win the 27 championship, I'm putting mine on the Astros.
Good ball of yarn, Fluffy Kitty Ninja reference there. So I got a specific question for you. Forrest Whitley, expected to be a free agent this year. We hear he's looking for north of 5 years right now in extension talks, if there is any. It's been quiet on the front on both ends whether or not that is. Do you think Whitley makes free agency? And if he does, is he the top option there?
Well, I haven't. I don't think I've dived deep enough into the potential free agent pool to say whether or not would be the top free agent. I would think he would be up there. I would imagine he would be up there. The bigger thing, and I know we're going to get to this later, but maybe I'll tease it, is that he's actually a guy that I had speculated that maybe could be left unprotected. Thinking about guys that maybe wouldn't have a lot of trade value because of their salary, but would be somebody that a GM may unprotect in the hopes that, hey, maybe the franchise expansion franchise would take them off our hands, would take that salary off our hands, but a guy that's still good enough to impact that expansion franchise. So I know we're getting to that later, but that would be my thought on him.
Okay. All right. Good thoughts. Thanks for that. And there's a little shuffling going down. Cody didn't like his spot, so he's in a different spot now. But Aiden is still in the neighborhood, hasn't had his chance to speak yet. Let's gain the thoughts of where he was in regards to how this World Series broke down and what he thinks the future for these 2 organizations will be.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for the yawning, but Daffy does censor me, and what I want to say to the Federal Aviation Administration right now is I work in an airport full time, and the FAA decided to, do some fun things the past few days, but that's neither here nor there.
We're on the
But
air.
as far as this series went, I think it went exactly the way everyone thought it would. There was one pretty good, low offense game, pitching staffs came to play, and the rest were offensive blowouts. At the end of the day, this series, and I said it before the series, and I'll say it again, this series was going to come down to which pitching staff could hold the other team to less than 8 runs in a single game. And that's really what it came down to, because both of these teams are offensive juggernauts. I'd say you're probably looking at the 1A and 1B lineup of eMLB, if you had to pick. I mean, you've got Danny Smith Jr., who is the next coming of Christ on one side, and then you got the well-roundedness of the Houston Astros. So both of these teams were equal. As far as the future goes, I think both of these teams are going to strive under the new division alignment. I think both of these teams have a great future. Both of these GMs know how to wheel and deal when they need to get pieces. And, you know, they seem like the real life Tampa Bay Rays. They always trade away a player right before he sort of finds that way to fall off. And they gain some guys who you've never heard of who decide to just become superstars no matter where they end up. So I think the future looks bright for both of these teams. But I think, like all of us have sort of collectively said, if you're going to pick a team, it's going to be Houston. And that's no knock on Jake. But Ben is just a mastermind, both in strategy and in the way he trades. And Ben also just has a deeper squad. I think what it'll come down to is, can he add some starting pitching? Same thing with Jake. Can both of these teams add some starting pitching? Because the bullpens aren't terrible. I don't think Forrest Whitley is the top option. I saw it in the comments, but I agree. I think Connor Seabold will be the top pitching option this offseason. But I think it'll come down to which team can finagle, and I think this goes for all 32 major league clubs. Which team can finagle the trade market to help their rotation, because there aren't that many viable options in free agency this year.
If I could jump on that, just make a correction. You know, I was thinking of a different Houston player on the expansion franchise comment that I made, because of course Whitley is either going to be a free agent or not, so he's not going to sign to an extension and then leave him unprotected. So I made a mistake on that one. But Whitley, yeah, very well could be the top free agent if they don't extend him.
Indeed. Now, it's important to point out, Tim Lowry has just reminded us all, since Danny Smith Jr. was compared to Christ only had 3 good years, so we'll hope Danny Smith Jr. has a little bit better than that, but I thought it was important that we point that out, and he might have a point here. So unless there's any final thoughts, here's what we think we'll do. We've got a commercial coming up in the near future. I'm going to force it to happen early here so that we have a clean 30 minutes. During the minute 30 break that will happen, everyone will get to get a quick refreshment, stretch all they need. We'll come back. We will get day 1 of the sim completed, see if there's anything noteworthy to look at here, and then we'll move on to our next topics. We'd love to hear from our panel what they thought about this 2026 season in general, what they considered surprises, disappointments. So it could be a very interesting conversation. So give us a moment. We'll take a very quick break, and when we come back, we will go to the next topic of our 2026 wrap-up show. Stick around. We will be right back. Coming back live with our 2026 eMLB wrap-up show here for our eMLB SportsNet broadcast. It is Commish LB here with Jason Cleghorn from the Twins, Cody Koshin from the Pirates, Ryan Hetzer from the Mariners, and Aiden Pearson from the Rays. So we just talked about the World Series itself. Let's look at the whole season. And let's start with the American League here. We'll each take our rounds and talk about what we think is of interest of most during this season that we just had. What I'm most interested from each of you is what you were more surprised by compared to prior seasons. What surprised you? Which teams impressed you or shocked you? And then who disappointed you outright, whether it's one or multiple. More focusing on teams. We can talk about individual players in our following segment, but would absolutely love to start. Let's start with our new guy, Jason Cleghorn, who's still learning our league, but I would love to see in what research he's done so far. Jason, American League, since you're going to be in there hot and heavy next season, what surprised you in regards to the teams you're aware of? And who would you say, yeah, it didn't look like they really did well?
I wrote down for my AL disappointments, and I should say, you know, this is no reflection on the general managers, but I was looking at a couple teams. I mean, you have to know that competing in the AL West is going to be tough sledding, but Texas team seemed to underperform a little bit. Just looking at their roster, looking at their pitchers, you know, to even be under 500, it looked like they could get a little bit more out of them. And then another disappointing team that I wrote down was the Tigers. Actually, I'm blanking out. I want to look at their lineup again, but I mean, they've got some serious star power, at least in the lineup, and they were, a decent amount under 500. They have not the best. Well, they got some decent starters, but I would look at them to maybe bounce back a little bit. I mean, Riley Green is a good player. Our good friend Chuck Norris is a good player. They just, I feel like their lineup is arguably better than mine, and they finished not even as well as the Twins did. So I was looking at them, and then very quickly, I'll just go real quickly for NL disappointments. I'm looking at the Dodgers. I mean, I know that this is not, this isn't MLB, but for a 92-win team, when you really look at their roster, they didn't sniff the playoffs, and some of that's a product of the teams around them. But they're pretty loaded, and it's hard to say a 92-win team underachieves, but maybe a little bit. And then the other would just be Milwaukee. I thought their roster is overall pretty good. I think their pitchers are pretty good, but just wasn't quite there. And I would expect them to bounce back a little bit, especially when you look at with Walker Buehler leading, the shell of Kristen Yelich, and Arenado still hitting 54 home runs. For them to only be a little bit over 500 is a little probably disappointing. I think.
Both teams that you mentioned did a lot of mid-season transition, and I think the most important thing to talk about here is, so I found it interesting that you said that you thought the Dodgers disappointed. If anything, the Dodgers were least expected to probably make the playoffs around the trade deadline, but winning basically 16 games over 500 helped them seal the deal and bridge a big gap that had taken place from the trade deadline. So a lot of the moving parts that Chris Holland has put into place show why I will always consider, and I still have PTSD from the 1.0 days of always looking up and seeing the Toronto Blue Jays led by Chris Holland more often than not ahead of my Red Sox at that point. But now here, getting to be just the commission, the storyteller, it's fun, and I can enjoy watching it. Here he comes. It's happening. You can see it, and it's already starting to take place. So if the second half of the 26th season is any indication of where the Dodgers can be, and we're seeing some breakout talent, Rob Deere Jr. showed what he has to be able to offer for the league. We also saw the emergence of Juan Corcoran, Darius McKenzie. How do you get, and you mentioned Milwaukee, so each of those teams trading parts where Darius McKenzie goes from Milwaukee over to Los Angeles. That in itself is a holy crap. So if there's anything, the team that probably makes me most nervous next season, if I were a GM in the National League, probably would be the Dodgers, because it's young, it's youthful. If the pitching holds its ground, Davis Perco's pitches a bit more like he did. Blake Snell, I don't think, did very well at all. Somehow still finished sub-5 ERA. But Freddie Peralta still shows he's got it. Another 200-plus strikeout season. The question mark is going to be, do they try to get Andrew James back? There's been word he's going to free agency outright. Dodgers don't know if there's any interest in him staying there, but they apparently have Cesarion Gomez, who was a top prospect in the Orioles organization for a long time, and he broke out with 24 saves himself this season. This team scares me. So I don't know if I agree on disappointment, but I'll say this. They're going to scare, and if there's anybody who could probably unseat the Cubs, I'd put them in the top 3 category right now for going for the NL pennant next year.
Yeah, that's a really legitimately good team. You can definitely see.
Yeah. Over to Cody.
For the AL, I mean, I was pretty surprised by the Indians. Sayers is a great GM. Um, Lindor had his ninth straight season with five or more WAR. Um, so that's pretty impressive in itself. And just the trades and additions, and just the drafting that City has done has really paid off with adding Aaron Judge. John Cotton was hot at the end of the season. Forrest Hyder was really good for him. Willie Whip Sittner. And Martin Bradford is, well, he's probably my Cy Young winner for the AL.
Hell of a performance by the rookie. Great props for bringing him up. And
absolutely.
Did you have Aaron Judge rebounding for 48 home runs this season? I didn't. I mean, you know, a lot of guys hit a lot of home runs, but Aaron Judge did it and had a much better average than he'd been doing. So he had better talent around him, and I think it reflected. So you're right. This team kept moving its parts, and you worried if it was the wrong combination, but it really worked in the end. And not to put a focus on one person, but if Forrest Hyder did not have that season-ending injury in the midst of the playoffs, Mike Valentine, he hit better than in the playoffs than he did in the regular season, but Hyder had shown a much more consistent performance. Did just losing one guy like that, is that the difference in why the Indians didn't make the series?
Yeah, I mean, making it to the ALCS was a huge improvement from prior seasons, so pretty impressed with that team. Really surprising.
I know many of us will jokingly say anything from the AL Central being able to get that far is pretty surprising in itself, because I know we like to pick and say that they're kind of the training grounds of the league, or at least that's what the demographics have been. But this is truly a team that got put together quite well. A lot of potential on the pitching side. Bradford looks like he is the real thing. Ryan Tecker looks like that he's got a long-term future here in the rotation. Whip Sittner looked pretty solid, had a few moments. But yeah, there's a lot of pitching prowess with youth there, and you can definitely see some potential in some of those offensive guys you mentioned. John Cotton, that was a hell of a postseason he had. If he can translate that into the regular season, you've got another scary middle of the order lineup. And just between you and I have to say, the steal of the year, which is where I will agree with Jason, this is a disappointment for Milwaukee, who had Don Erickson hitting 4 home runs after he was hitting .094 through 9 games with Milwaukee and got traded. He had 37 home runs and almost 100 RBI while hitting mid-260s. Sorry, I thought I had all those stopped. Give us 1 second as I go to murder all my notifications again. Thank you, Jake, for the tier 2. Again, I thought I had all of those off so that we weren't disturbing anyone's thought. Silly commish, professional streamer, as you can tell. Mr. Hetzer, what's your thoughts on the both the American League and the National League?
Sure. I think in the American League, you definitely have to look at that AL Central and just kind of how it got turned on its head as a very interesting development from last season, where Kansas City winning the division, going to last, Detroit being down there as well, and then Cleveland moving up to the top and all the way to the championship series. I think that's my surprise, or my pleasant surprise, has to be the Cleveland Indians. On the downside, in the AL, Texas was a team that came to mind for me as well, because maybe we forget, they already had a really good team, and then Vlad Guerrero came on the market, and Texas was the team that got him. And I think a lot of us at that time, my gosh, you had Vlad Guerrero to that team and that lineup, and what are they capable of? And they got off to a really poor start and pulled it together during the later stretches of the season. So, but I think overall we'd still have to say, that's a disappointment there. In the National League, Phillies, I think coming out of nowhere to win that division, taking it from the Nationals, who were a powerhouse, and then, of course, the Braves as well. I think the Phillies, for me, are clearly a surprise in the National League. If I'm thinking about a disappointment in the National League, the Braves, although I think we have to take away, the idea, and the Diamondbacks as well, where, of course, we know that both of those teams had GM switches mid-season, and so that is, if we take that out of the equation, we still just looking at the teams, the rosters, I think, and what they had done in recent eMLB seasons, that those two organizations would have to be seen as negatives for the past season as well.
So, Ryan, was that your way of saying that you're giving the Braves a pass because of the GM switch? Not naming anybody in person in that thought. I was just making sure I understood what you were trying to say there. So,
yeah, just trying to say that, if we take the GMs out of it and just look at what those two organizations had done recently, the players that they had, if you take even that out of it, it's still a disappointment.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to add about the Phillies is they were average lineup and average pitching, but their defense was very good. They were second in the NL, but none of their defensive players were superstars. They were all above average. So how he put that lineup together was very telling. And his team FIP was 4.5 something. No one over 100 innings pitched, and his pitching staff had a FIP under 4.47. So how he put together that defense was really smart and strategic.
I agree.
Honestly, it was very surprising how they performed.
I agree. We just took a peek at the rankings on things, and the only thing that they were top 3, and you nailed it, which is defensive efficiency, zone rating. Everything else, they weren't the team that you expected to be clutch hitting wise with a 241 team average. That was 13th in the National League, and they weren't necessarily they hit 233 homers. That's good for 6th, but they struck out a lot. They also didn't steal a lot, and they weren't the best base runners overall. Definitely some gaps on the year. So you're right. They didn't excel at anything but defense, but they were able to put it together. And there's some real good stories to tell there. The young two-way player Dante Haversham, the clutch hitter Bobby Orr, the other CCP rookie, Andrew Shamrocks O'Quinn, looks like he could be a very steady, no power, but definitely speedy contact type of guy that's going to be the one that helps to keep those defensive ratings up there. That looks like Philly's trying to use that as their primary staple to start here. So,
and Andrew Hunter.
Don't forget the Leviathan as well, Andrew Hunter as well. Mathoki, thank you for hitting the prime. Alerts are now finally off. Yay. I'm finally getting professional. Mr. Pearson, sorry for picking on you there a moment ago. It was just making sure just making sure we understood, but I know you're happy to be with your Rays now. So let's get your thoughts, both American League, National League, surprises and disappointments.
Before I start with that, we're forgetting the one thing about the Phillies, and this is the thing that is not on that. The fun differential with the PH. Come on, people, we're forgetting the fun differential.
The fun differential with the PH, yes.
Exactly. So what I would like to say, however, I think I'm going to start in the National League. The biggest disappointment I am going to say is the Atlanta Braves. From the guy who started there. The biggest disappointment on the Atlanta Braves goes by the name of Alex Verdugo. I mean, guy gets hurt. I paid a lot for him. Luckily, the guys who I shipped to Baltimore didn't exactly do great either. One of them retired 2 weeks after to go play basketball. I mean, it wasn't exactly a terrible trade, but at the same time, Atlanta was the biggest disappointment. They should have been better. I should have been better. That's just plain and simple. But I want to say, I think the biggest thing for me is the Dodgers. I think on the opposite of what Jason was saying, the Dodgers, like you were saying, Kamish, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but they're good. They're scary good. And Chris scares me as a GM who I never want to do trades with because he seems like the Death Star.
That's why you moved to the AL.
Exactly. Chris scares me.
This is Chris sitting here waiting for your next move on your message, and he's plotting. He's just plotting.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
So I'd like to segue back. You make a good point. Let's talk. I'm going to pull up Verdugo. He's kind of forgotten because he was lost to the torn meniscus in his knee. He's going to miss a little bit of time. This could affect his free agency, but this is a guy. This is a guy who absolutely is a top tier hitter. He hit 365 the prior season, gets traded to Atlanta, drops 150 points in average, gets injured, probably playing injured for most of the year. So, real quick, guys, Alex Verdugo, does he have a future still, or did we really see kind of the beginning of the end for him after that this season? Let's start with Aiden since he was this guy.
Yeah, and then I'll give my AL disappointments and successes. But I think he does have a place, but I think he needs to go to a team where they're going to give him the opportunity to play the outfield, but also spend some time at DH so there's less wear and tear on the body. I think, a great team for him, and I hate to say this because I hate putting ideas in people's head, but San Diego seems like a great landing spot for him to take that Franmil Reyes role.
That's an interesting call. Be keeping an eye on that. But yeah, Verdugo, of course, will be a free agent, we assume. And could be interesting to see who takes a flyer on him. He's only 30 years old, so but you got to think that this season he has to change his name to Alex Kim in order to go to San Diego. So says Tim Lowry. All right, you had an American League thought you wanted to do. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm going to combine the disappointment and surprise into one here. And I know I'm going to both of my teams. I apologize. But Tampa, going into, by the time I took over at the All-Star break, no one saw them being that low in where they were standing. No one can argue that fact. I think, my best wishes are to Charles, and I hope he's doing all right. Haven't talked to him, but I hope he's doing all right. I will say that every time I talk about this team. But they were not there. They were not anywhere close. And the fact of the matter is, when I came over, I took this team and turned them into a game out of the wild card. A singular game could have gone the other way, and I could have made a wild card or made a more interesting game 163 and potentially a game 164. So I think they're both the biggest disappointment at the beginning of the season. Then after the All-Star break, the biggest surprise, because me and Brennan did the math. I was third in MLB in record for the second half of the season.
Well, that team is it's got things top to bottom. And of course, I know your biggest frustration in your time being there is the loss of Doc Luger. It could be a potential career ender. They do think it's going to be some time before he's going to be able to recover from it. He's definitely not going to be a factor in the Rays' plans for 27 and definitely assumedly beyond. But if there's a team that might be able to weather that currently with the type of pitching it has and absolutely the offense that it can possess, Tampa's going to be a threat, and you weren't wrong. They definitely made a massive rally in the end. One game, day late, dollars short, but it just gives you signs that the future still looks very bright in Tampa.
I think what I told a lot of people is that my goal when I got to Tampa was finish less than 5 games under 500. If I could get back to around 500, I would have been happy. Well, I blew that out of the water and I got to almost the playoffs. So I think in general, I'm happy. I would like to give one more NL disappointment though. And okay. This is, again, no shade at any of the GMs. But for me, I expected a lot more out of Pittsburgh, I think, like a lot of people did. And I think what it came down to, and this is not poor management or anything, I just think you were hit by a bunch of players underperforming what they should have performed.
Yeah. I mean, again, we all know the story. Pittsburgh started this season the hottest team, 9-0. And you were just telling stories. And if memory serves, didn't they win 9 in the end to finish the season? I could be wrong. No. No, maybe I just thought that'd be very storybook. I was hoping. No, I'm sorry. It was the Marlins who finished with 9 wins for kind of a storybook finish. But again, it was a heck of a start for Cody's team. He was already thinking about places to put the banners in PNC Park. And unfortunately, it looked like a lot of chronic underperformance that happened there. So we'll see if some of the adjustments made will help here in the new division realignment coming. So
Cody, one quick question for you, real quick before we end. Cody, one quick question. What game is the banner ceremony for winning the first 9 games of the season going up? I just want to make sure I can get my tickets. Can you leave those at will call for me?
Oh, man.
No comment.
Cody is quickly looking when the schedule comes out for Tampa being on the schedule. So those dates will be circled. You can be assured of that. We are advancing. I did not mention it earlier while we were at the break. We did advance the first day. There was no news and information to report. We've got our second day advanced. Still no news on the transaction front, so no new players have signed. And a quick check, we don't have anybody who has done any type of fireworks at their home, involvement with Mrs. Machado, any of that silliness stuff that gets us, all these crazy stories that we don't like telling. So a quick peek here before we get ready to adjust to our next topic. We'll actually do that after the break. Is the free agent list. The top free agents that are being listed here currently, according to eMLB SportsNet, Framber Reyes was previously mentioned, 40 home run year. Got to think Reyes at 31 comes into this free agency, assuming he gets there, with a lot of opportunity to make a lot of coin from a team that really wants his services. Freddie Freeman, well, he's up there in age, but when you hit as many home runs as you are your age, I guess that's good when you're older, because that just says that there could be a market even if you want him as a DH. But Freeman's still very much a good defensive talent as well. Connor Siebel, we talked about already, probably being the top option for pitchers that are out there, with Forrest Whitley a near close second. And Trey Turner. Turner's been consistent for quite a while. He's got some speed. He's not the best defender. Maybe he might be better being transitioned over to the right side of the diamond. But Turner absolutely could be it. And we mentioned Carson Kelly earlier, where we have heard there is discussion on trying to lock a deal down. Nothing has been closed yet, but both sides are very interested, and it helps that Kelly himself is a Chicago native as well. Finally, a couple of other pitchers, Joel Cunell and Andrew James, are going to be top closers to be looked at, or Cunell more of a setup guy these days. His closing days have gone by for about 3 or 4 seasons. You never know, though. And Pablo Lopez had opted out of a deal, so he could be a good second-tier option based on what he's shown in his time both in Boston and Miami. So just a quick peek at that, but let's go right ahead. So what we're going to do, we'll take our next break. I'll force a break here a little early, another 90 seconds. Kelly will not be an FA, sorry, says Jake. So, looks like there's something on the forefront. We'll find out soon enough. Quick break here on our eMLB SportsNet broadcast. And when we return, let's talk individual players. Let's see who we think are our MVP, Rookie of the Year, Cy Young candidates, and all that good stuff. You're watching Fluffy Kitty Ninjas in the 2026 wrap-up show. We'll be right back. Back live here on our 2026 wrap-up show of the eMLB Universe. Kamish LB back here with you, joined by our panel today, Jason Cleghorn from the Twins, Cody Koshin from the Pirates, Aiden Pearson from the Rays, and Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners. Next, topic. Well, we had our next day simmed. We are now on Saturday, November 7th. We have a couple more days that we will be doing in today's sim, if I remember right. I even got to look at the schedule myself, make sure we land on the right day. I think I'm stopping on the 8th, if I remember right. I think that's how I plan to do it. So that way we were going on an even day calendar. Anyway, let's now transition over to talking about the awards. So we're right in the middle of the award voting season. Everybody is deciding who they thought was the best and what they did. So this will be probably a more interesting and more diverse topic, especially in some certain areas. So guys, here's the first thing I like to do. I want to focus in one league at this time. We'll all take our turns here. And then we can transition over to the National League, please and thank you. So let's start with the American League, and let's talk awards. So I'd love to hear from you who you think your top pick is for MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year. We can do closers, but if anything else that you want to add that you think is a surefire thing, let's see if you're right here on your predictions from there. Let's start with Mr. Hetzer, Ryan Hetzer from the Seattle Mariners. What are your thoughts on the American League this year?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the toughest one. I think I would imagine it elicits some debate. MVP with my vote went to Mike Trout. I did go back and forth because when you look at what Devers, did offensively, it's ungodly. It's out of this world. I think when I went and checked, I thought about changing my vote to Devers, and then when I went and checked and saw that he really was almost exclusively a DH, I could not give my MVP vote, my number one MVP vote, to a DH. So for us, our vote went for Mike Trout, with Devers and Rowand as our third place vote there. And for the Cy Young, I think it was, Bradford to me is a pretty clear-cut choice. Spears was our second place vote, and the only thing he really outperformed Bradford was with FIP, and even with that, it was by just a small margin. And so I think when you look at the landscape of the league, Bradford was definitely the top guy there. And then for the Rookie of the Year in the American League, now that one was, it's interesting because you have Bradford who wins the Cy Young, or who got my Cy Young vote, sorry, but yet it wasn't my top vote for Rookie of the Year, which was Ed Brown. And I think when you look at what, Ed Brown did offensively, when you put up over 6 WAR, only playing 132 games, that's just something that, to me, an everyday player like that, putting together that kind of rookie season, was my Rookie of the Year vote. So, are we gonna go? We said reliever too.
Well, your call. If there's anything else that you want to throw yourself out there and say this is surefire.
Well, my reliever of the year is Edwin Diaz. I don't think that's really in question.
I think that's pretty much a lock.
Yeah.
Any surprises? Like, do you think Buster Bluth wins a 4th straight Gold Glove over at third base, for example, or does the eradicated Eric Kelly finally surpass him?
Yeah, Kelly might be mad at his GM. I mean, if he was playing first base, he might have some of that Gold Glove hardware. But at third, no. I mean, for me, it is still Bluth there. Looking around for any other, I think an interesting name, a guy that maybe our left fielder Eli Lamb, not ours, meaning our vote. Not a guy with maybe a major profile in the league, but for us, we have him winning the Gold Glove in left field, so maybe that's one to point out.
Okay. All right. Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Thanks for that. Let's go over to Aiden, another ALGM. Let's get his thoughts on what he thinks on specific awards this year. Let's start with that controversial one. And by the way, I got a text from Billy, and he said, I'm going to be so ticked that Devers doesn't get it. He got a triple crown. Now, you guys all I'm sure you're going to make good points why. Just letting you know where the Red Sox GM is. He is 150% behind his guy. Aiden, what's your thoughts on the MVP?
My thoughts on the MVP are that these complete awards are all bogus. Aiden Pearson is not eligible for Rookie of the Year or a Golden Glove in either league, so therefore these awards are all completely nonchalant and meaningless. But if
he is so mad that his son has not been given any recognition. So let's just move on. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead, Aiden.
Exactly. No, but for MVP, just like in real life, how can you not give it to the guy who's a two-way stud in Shohei Ohtani? You got Trout, who's an amazing hitter and plays great defense. You got Devers, who won a triple crown, but he's exclusively a DH. How about the guy that plays two positions and is basically two players mashed into one?
Now, let's make sure our community knows what you're talking about. Shohei Ohtani played 152 games in the field, and he hit 52 home runs while batting .275 and having his first eMLB season over 100 RBI. Oh, by the way, he also won 14 games, had an ERA of 4.14, and had 206 strikeouts. Now, WAR-wise, he wasn't really given a lot of love pitching-wise, but yeah, I'd kind of say screw WAR in that instance. Name me someone else who did better. I'm on your camp. I'm more of an Ohtani guy than a Trout guy. I know everyone loves Big Fish Good. You know, I know we know Fishman Good, but Shohei Ohtani is better. He's Showtime on both sides this year.
I agree 1,000%. That's where our vote went here in Tampa. Speaking of Tampa votes, our Cy Young Award went to Martin Bradford as the number one. While I respect the Spears vote, I don't even think Spears was the best pitcher on his team. I think that goes to Jim Giesler, who got our second place vote here in Tampa. I think Giesler was just a little bit better than Spears. And then the one guy that honestly got robbed of the award, who probably could win the award any other year with the stats he put up, Denny Martinez gets our third place vote in Chicago. He had a terrific year. So he deserves some recognition as well when we're talking about this award.
Giesler had our third place vote. So.
Denny Martinez is a heck of a mention here. And for those who don't know, as we pull up Martinez quickly, he was 12-5 with the White Sox. That's not wrong. That's a 2.58 ERA. That's more than half a run better than anybody else. And he did that in 174 innings. Now, he's not a hard thrower. He throws low 90s. He's not a strikeout guy. And yes, maybe the one knock on him is that if you look at his FIP suggests he should be almost 2 runs higher than he was. Maybe a little bit of a benefit for the entire year. Right place, right time. Who knows? But I saw that and I was like, you got to give him some credit for the team that is being built around him and how he played. That's definitely... you want to be looking at Martinez next season and say, do it again. Do it again. I'd like to really see it. But it's his second straight 12-win season. He had a 2.8 ERA last year, and he did it in 15 innings more. So you make a good point. You should be looking at him. He should at least be in the top 5 votes of Cy Young candidates if you're going to do that. And he's shown he's the real deal. So heading into arbitration here at the least, I think he's setting himself up for getting well paid a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great shout. And then for my Rookie of the Year, I was kind of unsure where exactly to go with it. And then a name popped out to me. And so I went with Ed Brown as my number one, as I think many people did. But I'd like to give credit to the one guy that I feel like not many people are talking about in this, Alex Green in New York. This year, had 13 homers, but 42 RBIs. He may not have had the best season overall, but he filled in on a team in New York who didn't really have much to go off of. And I know some people are going to say, well, what are you thinking there? Well, he was one guy who I thought about. And then actually, I've been debating this list for like 3 weeks now. The Rookie of the Year one was the hardest one for me to vote. So I ended up going with a guy in Minnesota, actually. And I went with Tony Courtney. I think Courtney plays a great second base and is a guy who Minnesota can build around, especially Jason. I hate to like be a bug in your ear, but Courtney, LaRon Smith, you got a great combination there. Plus the outfield you have there. Minnesota could be primed for a run. AL West is going to be a little tough next year, but Minnesota's a dang good team. And I think under the right management, GT did a great job setting the table. But I think with you as well, this team could do some things and make some magic. And Hets, watch out for Minnesota. They're a sneaky little team that's just going to come up behind you.
I mean, regarding Courtney, I mean, I don't want to break what's the pro wrestling term, kayfabe or whatever. Yeah, but I mean, 27.8 zone rating would probably be like an all-time defensive season for an infielder. So for it to be from a rookie, yeah, I'm definitely he could possibly be a boost candidate to hit a little bit better, but I mean, that's just like transcendent level defense. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I was just going to say a certain set of ears perked up in the chat as wrestling got mentioned in kayfabe, as the one wrestling promoter of eMLB was like, kayfabe, bro. So, yeah. And yes, the dollar in the mail is coming to you for mentioning one of my sentimental favorites in Tony Courtney, Aiden. Any player from the 1.0 era who was on a World Championship Red Sox team, thank you for helping me beat Chris at least once. So on we go. Let's transition over to Jason, since we're still focused. Oh, go right ahead. Sorry.
Could I want to give my reliever. I just wanted to give my
go
reliever
for it. Go
who not many people are talking about. I know it's in Tampa. I know it's probably a homer pick. Can we just talk about Steve Fowler for a second here in Tampa? The 23-year-old, he had 24 saves, had a 1.85 ERA, and not to mention a 0.97 whip. Dude had a great season, and I think he should be in the consideration amongst a few other guys, like you mentioned, Edwin Diaz. You also look at C.J. Pelham and Dalbert Siri are, four guys who I debated between to get my vote. I gave Fowler my number one vote, however, just because of what he did in the second half of the season for the Rays.
Interesting. Now, Fowler definitely had a great season, and he shows a lot of promise. He probably still has plenty of growth to be able to be better, but a nice, impressive start. Definitely, obviously, when Edwin Diaz is in your league, there's no way of saying he were the best, but Fowler definitely give him the nod. He was very, very efficient when called upon, so nice mention there. Let's go over to Jason now and get his thoughts on who he thinks are his award winners in the American League.
All right, so for AL MVP, I went with Trout. I went with Danny Diaz up there. And then I went, when I clicked in Stats Plus, I voted Spence, but I would, if I could undo that, I think I would go with Ohtani somewhere in the top three. I think you're right. The combination of
bets can be changed.
Four ERA, but that offense has got to be, I would say, in the top three. A little bit off the script on Cy Young, a little bit. Mine were a little bit different from some of the others. In the order that I gave, and there's conventional wisdom that like wins don't matter, but I did go with Rosario as one of my three. I mean, he had one of the highest WARs. He did win 16 games, and his ERA and FIP were pretty good, and 30% strikeout ratio is very good. So next I had Ben Spears and then Martin Bradford. So those were my Cy Young Award winners for the American League. And then moving on, I'm going to go quickly because I don't know the intimacy of the players quite as well as some other people. For rookie of the year, I like somebody else mentioned one with Ed Brown. I mean, that's just 6.1 WAR in a rookie season is just nuts. I mean, shout out to Barry Allen, Liam Spencer, two also really good seasons for rookies. And then, it's Tony Courtney is so unique. There's really nothing like that, where most of the WAR is coming from defense, but the zone rating and the fielding is so good that I did have him third in my rookie of the year. And that's it. I don't really have a reliever, but.
So just as a reference before we transition over to him, Cody would like you to refer to Tony Courtney as the Nasim Nunez of the American League. And with that...
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I voted for myself for third for ALGM.
Yes. Cody, what's your thoughts on American League winners here?
We're talking about GM of the year. Actually, Ben had the highest improvement, but I had him second. I know Ben talks about, he's been given a good team, but you can really screw up a good team, and he hasn't. He just made it better. But I picked Savior just with what he's done with that team this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he deserves a lot of credit and recognition for that. My MVP, I kind of changed my mind last minute because my 2-3 are Trout and Ohtani, but I feel like if you take one of them out, LA will still make the playoffs. So my pick was Devers. I mean, he won a Triple Crown. I think you take him away, and Boston's not a playoff team.
You're right. They've got Danny Diaz, but they would have had an even tougher hill, and I think Tampa would have passed them if you did not have the babyface assassin hitting a league-leading 323, hitting a league-leading 58 homers, and a league-leading 154 RBI. That's a triple crown. That doesn't happen all the time. So the sheer fact that we can have this debate, even if he was a DH, the fact we can have this debate, I think Cody makes a really good point. Why Devers really was more valuable, perhaps, than the Fishman and Showtime, although all three of them are worthy of the title. But
I mean, even a triple crown in this universe is very unlikely. Besides maybe Danny Smith Jr., but that's very impressive what he did this season. My Cy Young was Bradford. I think he could have some MVP votes just to keep that team above water, and even more than that, made the playoffs, made it to the ELCS. The rookie of the year is Ed Brown. That's a no-brainer. And my reliever is a Houston reliever, but it's not Edwin Diaz. It's Delbert Siri. He had over 100 innings, I think. He had 80 shutdowns, 80 holds. So I think he deserves a lot of recognition. And my outfit for my Gold Gloves is all White Sox. Only Hampton and Hap. So
wow, okay, interesting.
I think that's pretty interesting. So.
Yeah, I agree. And great points on Siri. He did have over 100 innings pitched. He pitched almost half the year, 77 appearances, 135 strikeouts. And he's setting up Edwin Diaz. I mean, guy could probably close anywhere else, but he's never been made that guy. And I can't think of a guy who's just embraced his role and just murdered anybody that he's faced. He is rarely lit up. He did have an off year the prior year, but this is a guy who factors in very easily when he's part of a game. So great call. I think Albert Siri really got a lot of mileage. What was his WAR? 3.1. That's not even his best career WAR in a season. That was a couple of years ago. But for $8 million and for the role that he's done, he's got 2 of these things called World Series rings now from his performance. That has some merit. There's our American League run. Let's go over to the National League now, and I am going to stay right with our one National League GM, Cody. What did you think of your peers this season? And I know where your NL Silver Slugger for catcher bid most likely win, but let's talk the major categories. What's your thoughts there?
My GM of the year was Chris and Mike, co-GM of the year. I mean, I think what Mike has done with that team, I know he has his GM CCPs and everything, but there's more than that for a team. So I think he did really well. Just Chris, what he's done with his team, getting DMAC. It's been very impressive to see those two teams fighting for playoff spots. That NL West is going to be. I'm glad I'm in the NL East. Say that. My MVP. I don't know if this might be a surprise, but I went with Asher Kim.
Okay. That's not a bad pick. Not too much of a surprise, but why Kim over anyone else?
So did I.
Yeah. This is defense. He's one of those defensive superstars, and he has an elite bat, and he put up pretty good WAR. And my Cy Young is Jandy. I think that gives. I mean, you can't do anything. Jandy, best pitcher in the league already.
20 years old. Yep.
Trey Griffey, definitely our rookie of the year. Our reliever is Corey Knebel. I hate giving it to the St. Louis Cardinal reliever, but he was very impressive all season. I'm willing to die on this hill. Nassim Nunez should win the Gold Glove over Asher Kim. He should have won last season. He has a better defensive efficiency than Kim, and I think that's what matters most.
Okay, all right. Well, let's have a little fun here. Here was your leaders in fielding in the National League for 2026. Nassim Nunez did win the defensive efficiency run. Kim finished about 3 points higher in regards to the zone rating. Sean Paxler says Kim also won the best looking shortstop award as well. But yeah, Asher Kim shows up in more leadership categories in this particular go around than Nassim Nunez. Nunez is still pretty darn good. That I know, but I think his zone rating has kind of gone a little south from where it's been, so we'll see if that is a sign of where he's going. Ryan, let's go to you for your National League thoughts.
I don't see a lot of debate. I may be alone in that. I mean, I have a couple different names than what Cody had mentioned, so maybe there is debate, but I just saw Smith Jr. as a clear-cut MVP. Yeah, I certainly do see the defensive value of Kim, but Smith Jr. is no defensive slouch in an important position in center field, and he also tacks on 47 stolen bases. So Danny Smith Jr. is my MVP with Kim, both Asher and then Yuna, second and third for us. And then for the Cy Young, Jandy Bronson. Again, for me, it wasn't a very difficult choice. Candela, his teammate, being who we had as coming as our second place vote. Then looking at Rookie of the Year, again, I can't imagine anybody making a case for anyone other than Trey Griffey. The guy has a pretty good case for the MVP. So when we look at Rookie of the Year, it's hard to really imagine anybody else there. My NL reliever of the year is Connor Thomas, which is kind of a new name into the mix, I think, which kind of a surprise, came out of nowhere in some ways. And I didn't mention anything about GM. In the AL, I did give my vote to Ben. And then the National League, Steve, just winning over 100 games was my first vote for GM, and then Chris. Yeah, I think all of us see what's happening, in La La Land with the Dodgers as really something to be watching out for in the league. So those were some of my NL picks there.
All right, excellent. Let's go over to Aiden for his thoughts in the National League.
For me, for GM of the year, first of all, I went Chris number 1. Just the turnaround he gave to that team. For me, it showed. I went Steve number 2, and then I went Jake number 3, because I think if you make it to the World Series, you deserve to be in the top 3. Personal opinion, however it may be. When it goes to MVP, I went a little different because I like to be different, if that isn't apparent already by the insider or by the podcast as well as this on here. I went Edgar Barrios with my MVP pick out of Cincinnati. Man had a tremendous season, and I feel like with Trey Griffey there, Griffey took the spotlight, and everyone forgot about Edgar. But Edgar put together a quiet, very, very, very good season, and in my opinion, an MVP season. I had Danny Smith at the 2, and then I went the guy who we talked about, Darius McKenzie, at the 3. Any other season, Darius McKenzie could have been there, could have been the number 1 spot, if you ask me. We take a look at Cy Young Award. For me, I went Ethan Candela, Jandy Ronson. That's 1A, 1B, and both of them are in San Francisco. And Mike, you're a bad mamma jamma for having both of those as your 1-2 in that rotation. And then I look at Rookie of the Year. I feel like, as everyone said, Trey Griffey, not much question there. I think the one thing that I guess might be a little bit of I don't know if people want to call it a surprise or not exactly what everyone thought. When I was doing my Silver Slugger Award, I wasn't exactly sure where to go with at the catcher position, because I felt like a lot of the players were very, very similar players. But for me, just because of the lack of strikeouts, yes, the strikeout to walk ratio may not be exactly the same. And a lot of these catchers there are the same. I went with Ethan Hearn in Cincinnati just because I felt like he was the best option out of all the players there. Obviously very similar to Marc-Andre Fleury in my opinion, but I just think Hearn was a little bit better of a player in my opinion. More doubles, 1 less home run, similar RBI numbers, similar on base, a higher slugging though, higher OPS, same exact WRC plus, 1 off on the WOBA, but a higher batting average. And batting average still plays a role in my opinion. And, maybe a little bit of it was, just to stick it to Cody, because Cody and I like to have our debate. Who would you rather have, Pearson or Fleury? So
I know that debate will go on for quite a while. You guys will have plenty of time to be able to continue to make that argument, but a nice, interesting call on Hearn. I'm going to assume Fleury will be most likely the winner of that Silver Slugger, but Hearn did pretty darn good coming in a spot that hasn't had a lot of flair since Tyler Stevenson left, and Stevenson, he liked to hit mostly during national broadcast games, it seems like, so he definitely loved the big stage. But yeah,
I drafted both of them in the same draft. I was pretty high on Hearn, so
yeah, that's true. That's true. You did trade him there, so. So Jason, it is time for your thoughts here in the National League, and I think that is our last person for National League thoughts. Go for it.
Oh, I was distracted. I was getting LeRon Smith trade offers.
Oh, okay. Yep, that's right. He did throw that out there, and I'm surprised a certain GM hasn't been. See, he's walking away trying to go get his phone. Had a feeling.
Who said I wasn't the one texting him?
I figured it might be, but the guy voted most likely to is the guy who got to know him in real life a little bit. And shout out to LeRon if he checks in with us from time to time and hopes that he enjoys what he is seeing. And hope he has a good season coming up here as he finds a new home. So, Jason, go for it.
All right. So for NLGM, I went with Mike Kilkenny first, Jake Randolph second, and Steve Kim third. I went a little off the script. I see, I'm coming in a little new, but I see where Mike improved the Giants by 15 games. He took them from 78 and 84 to 93 and 69. That's pretty impressive. Obviously, Jake in the World Series, so I put him in second. And then Steve also had a pretty big improvement. So as far as MVP, I went Asher Kim, Trey Griffey, and then third I had Unikim. Was my list. For NL Cy Young, I went with Candela first. Actually, Walker Buehler second.
Okay.
And Dowd. I went a little bit off script. I didn't want to pick the same thing that I thought everybody else picked. I think there's a big difference between the top, say, 3 to 4 starters in the league, and then there's a kind of a group like right under them. So I wanted to give some credit to some of those guys. And then obviously, like Trey Griffey, that's a rookie of the year for like all time, really. So, in fact, I don't know pro wrestling again, like what the best rookie season of all time really even would be. But I mean, Trey Griffey would have to be up there, really. So that's how I went.
All right, guys. Good. Awesome and perfect timing because we're right up against the next break. So I will take the break. When we come back, we have some history to announce, which will be a perfect segue to our next part. We're going to have a little fun in this next scene. Stick around. One more segment here of Fluffy Kitty Ninjas and the 2026 wrap-up show. We'll be right back. Coming back live for our final segment of our 2026 wrap-up show here, eMLB SportsNet style. Commish LB back here with you again. Many thanks to our panel here. Jason Cleghorn from the Twins, Cody Koshin from the Pirates, Aiden Pearson from the Rays, and Ryan Hetzer from the Mariners. Great to have all of you and appreciate your time and energy. So we've got some history that we would like to introduce. eMLB has been around for 22 years. Real life years, that is. We're not talking sim years. I've been doing this for a little while. The lines on my face, that certain milestone number that I hit, egads. I've almost been doing MLB for half of my life. My lord. But it's the first time in the history of eMLB, in any of its universes, that we have an expansion of its major league. We are going to go from 30 to 32 next season. Our two teams are officially here. It is the Montreal Expos. It is the Portland Stags. And we have our first official signing. It's a staff member, though, but congratulations to the Expos. I am not 60 EVC. You bite your tongue. I might forget that you just boosted. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for the boost. We appreciate that. Chris Franklin has signed to become the assistant GM of the Montreal Expos. They have their first official staff member in place. Whoa, geez. Sorry, the alerts are off, but as you just threw Jedi Cats in the chat, thank you, Aju, for doing that. 5 gifted subs. Appreciate you doing that. So again, our first official signing of this off season. Quickly, for those who are not in the know, again, we are expanding our major leagues to have the Montreal Expos, who were, yes, eMLB is old enough that 1.0 once upon a time had Les Expos. But when they moved to Washington, well, we followed suit. The Expos are finally back in eMLB after 18 real-life years of not being a part of it. So congratulations to them. We're excited for that organization back to the Stade Olympique for now. And, of course, the Portland Diamond Project, Portland Diamond Ballpark, will be where the Portland Stags out in Oregon will be playing. They'll be in the American League West, and the National League East will be the Montreal Expos. So right now, staff is only allowed for the Stags and the Expos to be signed. It's a kind of a free window for them. All major league teams will then be able to do their staff signings afterwards. And then the Expos, while the majors are being signed for the other teams, the Expos and Stags will be able to start filling their AAA personnel. So we'll be talking about these teams very much here in the coming days. So let's have a little bit of fun. We've got not this Sunday coming, but the following Sunday, we're going to have our first ever expansion draft. We're going to have 75 rounds where Portland and Montreal pick players. They're going to take 5 players from every single team. They're going to get 75 players to start with as we get ready for free agency. Everybody can do free agency. It's a fair game in that. But these teams are going to build from scratch, and they're going to be picking from certain organizations. So let's have a little bit of fun. I would love to hear from each of you. If you want to simplify, let's just talk. Who do you think are the 3 most likely players to be exposed, we'll call it? Don't you dare, Daffy. Who's going to be exposed, and who's most likely to end up being at the top of that list for Montreal and Portland? And if you want to be so bold, go ahead, call your shot. Who's going where? Feel free. Let's have a little fun with this. And this one, I haven't started with Aiden yet. I'm very interested in his thoughts. Let's go.
So welcome to, I'm not sure who gets the first overall pick. I'm not sure if we've decided that yet, technically between the 2 teams. But going number 1 overall, welcome to, I'm just going to play this game and say Montreal gets the first overall pick. And with the first overall pick in the expansion draft, Montreal will take Corey Seager of the Los Angeles Dodgers as the number 1 overall pick.
Wow. Okay.
He was on my list too.
Corey Seager, the 32-year-old, as we take a peek at him, he had a 23 home run season, hit 267, a $37 million player, and still has a lot of money to make here over the next 4 seasons that are guaranteed. He's got $143 million of promises coming to him. And getting a certain guy named Darius McKenzie probably means, I think you're right. Chris is probably going to put him on the list. Just as any of the GMs going to be bold enough to go for him. So, interesting call. Who else are you thinking's out there?
I'm going to give you 2 more names, and I'll give you one of them from my team. So this is a little announcement of someone who won't be protected, if you want to call it that. Spoiler alert. I'm going to give you a second baseman from Baltimore and Shervin Newton. I don't think will be protected. I think he's a really viable second base option that one of these teams can go after. Great defensive, good platoon against lefties. And then from Tampa Bay, if someone wants to take a shot, a defensive wizard with high power who just really is sort of blocked and doesn't have a spot, Murdoch Aldred, I think will get selected at some point during this draft.
So we just learned here that Murdoch is going to be available, the Torontoan. So a Canadian maybe picked by Les Expos. C'est possible. But 27 home runs for him back in 2025. And he had won a bet. He spent all of his season in Durham. So I think it's fair to say that he's probably, someone you won't mind getting rid of. It's not really a salary play in that particular instance. So, but interesting. And it's a little fun to have a little bit of breaking news announcements here. So we'll see how that works out. Let's go to Cody here. Cody, where do you think? Who are your top picks on players you think are most likely destined, and if you want to be so bold as to pick a destination for any?
So I kind of looked at like higher payrolls, and one name kind of stood out to me on Boston is Andrew Benintendi. Boston has one of the highest payrolls, if not the highest payroll in the league right now. So that luxury tax is gonna be coming. He's a decent player still, but I feel like 18 million's could be expansion team could eat that 18 million and have a serviceable player with Benintendi. I looked at Houston. Now I'm thinking maybe Ben might leave Tucker or Chapman unprotected. His team's loaded, so he might be okay with having one of those players taken.
If you're right with either Tucker or Chapman, which one do you think is more likely to be expendable here for Houston?
Probably Tucker, because they have Jordan and Isla out there in the outfield. Chapman plays a better defensive third base, so I feel like I know he's on the trade block already, but he might not protect him. And another team that I looked at was the Dodgers, and obviously the Angels with Murray is going to be left unprotected, but I don't see any team taking that contract. But I see Corey Seager and Blake Snell as potential expansion draft picks.
Well, Snell's got one more year guaranteed. Then he gets the right to choose on a player opt-out as we take a quick peek at Snell. He has a player opt-out the following season, but will be making north of $40 million as you look at his situation. This is all advantage Snellzilla in this situation, and if you're going to take a chance on him, you're definitely going to have to toss a coin over to him for a while. You got to think that unless he just goes lights out, he's very likely to want to take these options and continue to get paid. He's still, oh goodness, what, about $204 million remaining in total salary here. Or a little, we'll remove 40 million from that because it still reflects this particular season that we just finished up. So good call. I bet I wouldn't be surprised if Snell's there. It's just a matter if anyone will bite considering that contract. Ryan, why don't we have you give your thoughts on who goes where here?
Sure. I had to think a little bit about what would the expansion franchises be looking for. I think, you know, the top prospects in everybody's organizations aren't going to be available because they don't have enough service time or they'll be protected. So I think some in those early rounds, teams, each of them may be looking for some high salary guys who with shorter term contracts. A couple of the names mentioned I've looked at as well. Chapman, that was the name I mixed up earlier when Whitley was brought up. But I think Chapman is a potential guy that could be unprotected. And, you know, you could see him having enough value, however, for an expansion franchise to want to bring him on board. I'll give you two new names that haven't been mentioned. Looking at Framber Valdez, you know, he's had 3 consecutive really strong years, but yet, I mean, he's owed, I think, $30 million per for 2 or 3 more seasons. So you could see Detroit maybe wanting to get out from under that contract and leaving him exposed, but yet maybe not a lot of trade value because teams don't want to trade for the contract. The other, and this is maybe a pie in the sky, but Christian Yelich, I thought it's a huge contract. Okay, huge contract, but it's just 1 year. No one's really going to look to trade for Christian Yelich probably unless he retains. And so, yeah, I mean, he could maybe leave him thinking, you know, hey, it'd be good for me if the expansion teams pick him. So yeah, that would be another one for consideration maybe. And it would only be a 1-year commitment, and you get a guy in that's gonna keep you afloat.
Yeah, a couple of guys that you mentioned, they're both Chapman, Yelich, are both guys that have one more year left of contract. Both could realistically end up being signed further, but at the same time, that's an interesting call. So it's a matter of whether or not anyone would take a chance on them. Both of them have still shown their worth. Each were 30 home run hitters, but I'd say Yelich probably had the better year. So just me thinking out loud, I'm thinking if there was just a choice between those two, which it won't. But if I were to say one's more likely to be available, Matt Chapman might be. But I like the call earlier about Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker would probably be the guy most likely left on the island if it was a choice between him or Chapman. Jason, where would you like to provide some thoughts here on expansion?
So as the GM that knows the least about the league, I'm going to mention a guy that I identified. So basically what I did when I looked at this question is, because I don't know the intimacy of every team the way that others are, I tried to look at it as what I would do. So, and I've not to, I'm not giving out any proprietary information, but I have a little theory that I play in my offline franchises as I don't want to lose expensive. I'd rather lose cheap. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you look at the Blue Jays with their ace Juan Coelho, he's young enough to be appealing to a new team, but he's old enough at 28 for that OOTP pitching kind of 31 cliffage, that where some pitchers don't fare well when they age, that I could see him being a decision to say, okay, we didn't do very well with him. He's our most expensive guy by far. I want to nuke this and kind of start over and have a fresh start. I like the ground ball. His ratings aren't great, but he would be one guy for your expansion team where you're like, okay, that guy's going to pitch 200 innings, period. I mean, he's a workhorse. I mean, the guy was 13 and 18. I mean, that's like some old house Radborn stuff for 2026. So, and the money goes down. He has kind of a backward contract where it's front loaded and it goes down. So he's my guy. I'm gonna get some razzes in the chat, but I also had Vlad Guerrero on there.
Okay.
Because he's very expensive. He plays a it's not, he plays first base or DH. You can find a guy that, Seth Beer, those types that can hit a lot of home runs. Not nearly the OPS, but you can find a cheaper guy for a bad team. That would be a guy that I would want to shed that contract.
Interesting. Now, I won't call Texas a bad team. I'll say they severely underperformed in a division that is the most competitive of them all. A team that's built around speed, does not possess a lot of power. They brought Vlad in for that. They got 40 home runs out of him. Vlad did Vlad things, but it just didn't translate. And the most important point made up is, look at what Texas gave up for him, and I think that's the growing pains that we saw this particular year. So I don't think Vlad's going anywhere for the price paid for him. Boy, if him, or especially when you said Juan Coelho, I think if you don't make him the number one pick, if he is somehow, some way left out there, then I'm like, wow, insane. I don't think it would happen, but that's an interesting call. He would be one of my top choices based on his track record and giving him a shot. Still think
and
Vlad's...
then Ryan had my I had Yelich as my second guy. It's a crap ton of money, but you're on the hook for 1 year. You're probably not going to be able to trade him. If I'm these guys, I want to have at least one guy that I can sell some tickets with. I could definitely see that. So Yelich.
Okay. All right. Well, We have some news here, so we want to go over a few things. We have some important news to be able to share with you from a variety of different teams. I have advanced to the final day of the sim, and we have some things to discuss. First things first, Freddie Freeman. He'll be staying in Atlanta for 3 more years. He signed a 2-year extension with a vesting option for a third. He'll be making a little over $25 million in that time. He hit 255, 37 home runs, 86 runs batted in. Freddie Freeman is going to be staying in Atlanta, and I think that is a nice fitting tale, and I hope it will be successful. You hope at least for the 2 years that Freeman will continue to perform, probably get to 450 career home runs at least, maybe push 2,750 hits. I like that signing considering he's still high end and he still has potential. We mentioned him earlier. Well, there ain't going to be any worry about trying to get him. Franmil Reyes has signed an extension. 5 years, $149 million. He can opt out of this deal in 2 years. It's a pretty solid deal for him. He definitely has earned that money. And that is a big stick that a lot of people were hoping wasn't going to stick around. You'd hoped that San Diego was not going to spend the money and that they were going to hang on because they always like to cry poor. But that might tell you that with keeping Reyes, there might be some trade movement happening on the forefront so that they can make that deal more affordable, because 5 years at $148.6 million, that's not cheap for that organization. Here's one. This is another big one, and someone here will be a happy person.
I cannot hit curveball. Straight ball, I hit it very much. Curveball, that's our friend.
The Cuban Voodoo Master has signed a 5-year deal as the arm of triumph was up there for Hetz. Pedro Serrano will become the continued staple of the Mariner Mafia as the 50 home runs that he hit last year, the second time he's gotten to 50 in his 4 seasons in the majors, have been done. Charm City worked closely enough to say what he was willing to do and said he likes that Seattle has been a good fit for Serrano, so he gave Hetz permission to go up to the limits of the rules, which meant 5 years, and a 5-year extension has been signed. Can you imagine what Pedro Serrano could make when he is 29 years old in a few years, either by extension or otherwise? Wow, that could be impressive. Guy's already got 188 career home runs, and he's only played 4 seasons, guys. He's not even 24 yet. That's a couple weeks from now. So
he hit 200 in his age 24 seasons.
Geez, that is scary. That is scary to think of in itself right there. There are other signings. I have to look at these, but one that we were talking about earlier and was hinted at on happening is now official. 3-year extension for Carson Kelly, the Chicagoan playing for the Cubs. He has signed a $48 million deal. Player option on that 3rd year, but just a little bit more than he makes now. He had a 4 WAR, hit 291, 12 homers, 53 RBI this season, and he plays pretty comfortably there in front of his hometown Cubby fans. Nothing eclectic, nothing huge. He doesn't dominate in anything specific, but he gets the job done, and the Cubs love having him back there. Meanwhile, we talked history earlier. Let's talk further history. Congratulations to the Portland Stags as they have landed their first staff member, as Tadahiro Ogino from Japan will sign on as the assistant GM for the organization. He signed a 4-year deal, so both organizations are starting to lock down their staffs as they get ready for their expansion draft and their first off season. Both of these teams, besides the expansion draft, will be given number 1, 2 picks in the first round. Once we do the official role of determining who gets what on the first pick for the expansion draft, the other team will automatically get the first pick in the amateur draft. So that is the deal. Whoever gets first pick in the expansion draft, the other team will be the number 1 pick in the amateur draft, and they'll just draft 1, 2. Oakland will draft 3rd, which they're probably sad about because they would have liked to get the number 1 pick this year, I would think. There is plenty other news to be able to look at. A lot of one-year deals. I have to scour this and make sure that these are legit, but those were probably the most prominent multi-year extension deals that we wanted to talk about before we called it an evening. Rule 5 is coming up as well, as JR asked about, but right now I'm just trying to get to the expansion draft, get that done, and basically survive. Rule 5 will take place after that as well. So, want to say thanks to my panel as I get the file ready to go. We are on November 9th as I press some buttons and get that ready. Real quick, excuse me, I just want to see where we're rating on the way out here this evening. The PBE sim is out of the park. The parent channel is out. They're doing This Week in Perfect Team, so we'll go raid the mothership for everyone who is here. Thanks again to our panel today. Jason Cleghorn from the Twins. Nice debut here, sir. You did just fine. Welcome to the universe. Ryan Hetzer from the Mariners. Cody Koshin from the Pirates, and he had to step out, but Aiden Pearson from the Rays. Want to say thanks to all of you guys for spending your time here with us. For today, that's it. Back to the litter box I will go. Lefty-Kitty Ninjas do assassinate, and you're looking at their victim. So next time I can find some glue and tape, I'll put my head back on straight, and we'll be back in front of you. For the moment, we're not going to be back in front just yet. We're going to wait until after the weekend is done. There is a hockey tournament this weekend that is a bit away. I might have to adjust the Sunday schedule, as I thought we'd be back on Sunday night. Then I realized the tournament goes into Monday because of Martin Luther King. Dom's got at least one hockey game on Monday, so we may have to tweak the schedule a little bit. Not much, but just a little bit, so you guys are aware of. Hate doing it, but it is what it is. For now, Commissioner LB reminding you how you think directs your life. When you think your best, you're going to do your best, so please enjoy the rest of your day. Go do your best. Thanks for these guys for doing their best. For now, I am out of here. We will see you guys soon. Peace.
You jackass!